The discovery felt like the finale of my entire career. After 15 years of documenting the ordinary, I found something extraordinary. A glowing squid species unlike anything in our records. Its tentacles pulsed with an otherworldly blue light as our remotely operated vehicle captured it, moving through the crushing darkness of the Mariana Trench. "Are you seeing this, Alistair?" Dr. Meyer's voice crackled over the intercom from the control room aboard the research vessel Odyssey. I leaned closer to the screen, its eerie glow lighting my face in the dim room. Beyond the viewport behind me, endless Pacific waves rocked our ship, isolated above Earth's deepest place. "I see it," I replied, fingers flying across the keyboard, capturing frame after frame. "It's definitely not in any registry. This is something new." The squid showed unique glowing patterns, 3 pulsing rings circling its mantle. Its tentacles were shorter than typical deep-sea squid, with bright tips I recognized as specialized photophores. In my mind, I'd already named it Abyssoteuthis lumina, the luminous abyss squid. For 3 days, I meticulously documented everything from the footage. I cross-referenced every scientific database, confirming this was an undocumented species. My name would be attached to this discovery forever. The ship groaned against the deep's pressure as I worked, the humming equipment amplifying our isolation. Exactly 72 hours after we first saw the squid, I scheduled a video call with Dr. Anya Sharma at the Oceanic Institute to discuss my findings before final submission. "I've reviewed the footage," Anya said, her image flickering on screen, "but I'm confused. Why are you presenting Abyssoteuthis lumina as a new discovery?" A chill spread through my chest. "What do you mean?" Abyssoteuthis lumina was documented back in 1983 by the Japanese expedition. It's been known for decades. Her brow furrowed. "Are you feeling all right, Alistair?" My mouth went dry. "That's impossible. I just named it that. I checked every database." "Check again," she suggested gently. "The original paper by Nakamura is quite important in our field." Hands shaking, I pulled up the International Marine Biology Database, the same one I'd searched days ago. There it was. Abyssoteuthis lumina, first documented by Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura in 1983, complete with decades of studies, old photos, and anatomy diagrams. "I don't understand," I whispered, more to myself than to Anya. "This wasn't here before. I checked. I always check." "Perhaps you're overworked," she said kindly. "It happens." After ending the call, I sat frozen in the humming silence. Had I missed decades of research? Was exhaustion tricking me? Yet a nagging certainty clawed at my mind. Something felt fundamentally wrong. The databases that were empty days ago now overflowed with information that hadn't existed then. I rubbed my eyes. Professional embarrassment I could accept, but this felt like reality itself had shifted beneath my feet, leaving me alone with the impossible memory of what had been. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw database entries that shouldn't exist. Taxonomic records and research papers dated decades before I'd discovered that bioluminescent squid. The rational part of my brain offered explanations. Fatigue-induced hallucination, simple oversight, or database synchronization errors. But none explained why I had such vivid memories of empty search results just days earlier. For the next 2 days, I obsessively rechecked every marine biology database I could access. I compared my initial ROV footage against the supposed historical records of Abyssoteuthis lumina, The images matched perfectly, too perfectly. Even the angle of the specimen's tentacles when we first encountered it was identical to illustrations in papers supposedly published in 1983.
"You look like hell, Finch," Dr. Reyes commented when I shuffled into the ROV control room for our next scheduled dive. "Maybe you should sit this one out." "I'm fine," I insisted, settling into my chair with a thermos of black coffee. "Just working on something." The coffee tasted bitter. Necessary. The dive proceeded normally until the ROV's lights illuminated a hydrothermal vent at 8,400 meters. Clinging to its edge was a ghostly white sea cucumber, undulating gently in the current. "Would you look at that?" Reyes whispered. "That coloration pattern is unusual." My heart kicked up a gear. This was my chance to prove to myself I wasn't losing my mind. "I'll handle the cataloging," I volunteered, keeping my voice carefully level. Back in my cabin, I implemented my improvised protocol. First, I searched every marine taxonomy database for matches. Nothing. I took photos of my laptop screen with my personal phone, clearly showing the timestamp and the empty results. I recorded a video of myself scrolling through the databases. Finally, I wrote detailed notes in my hardbound field journal, the old-fashioned kind with sewn binding and waterproof pages. June 17, 2023, 2:32 p.m., Universal Coordinated Time. Discovered unidentified echinoderm specimen at coordinates 11 degrees 22 minutes north, 142 degrees 35 minutes east, depth 8,412 meters. No existing records found in any database. I am officially designating it Scotoplanes albicans. I added a sketch, then stamped the page with my thumbprint in ink. For 3 days, I barely slept. I checked my phone hourly, verifying my photos and videos remained unchanged. I kept my notebook locked in the small safe in my cabin. Exactly 72 hours after the initial discovery, I sat alone in the lab and performed the search again. There it was, Scotoplanes albicans, first documented by a French expedition in 1992. The database now contained 30 years of research papers, specimen photographs, and distribution maps. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone. The photos I'd taken of the empty search results now showed full pages of information, as if I'd photographed the results I was seeing now, not those from 3 days ago. The video showed the same thing. The digital evidence of reality as I'd recorded it had been overwritten. I nearly dropped the phone, fumbling for my cabin key. Inside, I unlocked the safe with shaking fingers and pulled out my notebook. The handwritten entry remained unchanged. My own documentation of finding a new species that had apparently been known for decades. Something impossible was happening. Not a glitch, not a mistake, not faulty perception. Something was methodically inserting new species into reality's timeline, fabricating their histories, and erasing all digital evidence to the contrary. Worse still, as I flipped back through my notebook pages, I found entries about routine specimens we'd cataloged earlier. Out of sickening paranoia, I checked each one in the database. They were all there, exactly as I documented them, but now each entry showed decades of prior research attached. Whatever was happening had been going on long before I noticed it. The only difference now was that I was watching it happen. I closed the notebook and pressed it against my chest, a sudden cold certainty washing over me. These handwritten pages, this physical book, might be the only remaining proof that reality itself was being systematically rewritten. I slept with the notebook under my pillow that night, waking every hour to check that it was still there, still unchanged. By morning, I'd come up with a plan. Not to stop whatever was happening. How could I possibly stop something capable of rewriting reality? But to figure it out, to understand its patterns, its rules. Exhausted but focused, I went to the ROV control room before the dive crew showed up. I needed to be alone, needed to take charge of today's dive plan. "You look like hell, Finch," Captain Mercer remarked when I passed him in the narrow corridor. "Just eager about today's dive," I lied, keeping my eyes down. Alone in the control room, I opened the dive software and changed our objective. Instead of going straight to our intended dive depth, often 1,500 meters, I set the system to make stops at these depths. 9,000 meters, 7,500 meters, 5,000 meters, 3,000 meters. If my theory was right, if this reality rewrite was moving upward from the deepest trenches, I needed proof. The rest of the team came in and we began the dive. I fought to act normal, to chat like usual, hiding the tremble in my hands while I controlled the robot's cameras. At 9,000 meters, we found a see-through snailfish with bright red fins, nothing I'd ever seen in any records. I suggested we catalog it, disguising my burning anticipation with a mask of professional curiosity. At 7,500 meters, a strange, extra-long viperfish with an odd jaw. Another catalog entry. Another 72-hour timer began ticking inside my head. At 5,000 meters, a glowing jellyfish with loopy light patterns. Catalog. Timer. At 3,000 meters, a crab-like creature with eyes unique in our databases. Catalog. Timer. "Interesting pattern today," Dr. Wei said, tapping his screen. 4 brand new species at 4 different depths. That's not your average dive." I only nodded, afraid that if I spoke, my voice would shake. That evening in my cabin, I called Anya. "I need to tell you something," I said, struggling to sound calm. "Something impossible is happening with our discoveries. Every species we catalog, 72 hours later, it shows up in historical records like it always existed." The silence on the line felt thick and heavy. "Alistair," she finally replied, gently, sounding worried. "Maybe you should talk to Dr. Patel, the ship's doctor." This isn't," I stammered, then took a hard breath. "Just look at the data, the squid, the sea cucumber, and now these 4 finds today. Check the databases exactly 72 hours after each one goes in. You'll see it happen. Alistair, listen to yourself. You're talking about reality changing. Do you know how that sounds?" "I know exactly how it sounds," I said sharply. "That's why I've been writing it all down. I've got proof in my notebook. When was the last time you got a full night's sleep? Deep-sea isolation can mess with anyone." I slammed the phone down. The next 3 days were agony. I ate little, slept less. I kept away from the crew who started sneaking glances at me whenever I walked into a room. Whispers trailed behind me. Pieces caught my ear. Pressure sickness, and needs checking out, and getting unstable. But I knew what was coming, and right on time, exactly 72 hours after each catalog entry, it happened again. 4 species. All now solid, factual history with decades of research behind them. 4 species that hadn't existed until we tagged them, now sewn perfectly into the fabric of the world. The worst part? The pattern was unmistakable. Whatever this force was, it had started at the absolute bottom, deep in the crushing dark, and was steadily moving upward. Each new thing we tagged lived in shallower water than the last. Lying in my bunk that night, staring at the ceiling, the awful truth hit me like cold water. If this kept moving upward, it would eventually reach the surface. What then? What happens when it gets to us? I clutched the notebook tight against my chest, my breaths coming shallow and fast. I was the only one who saw it coming, the only one who knew, and nobody would ever believe me. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay rigid in my bunk, mind racing, calculating the pattern I'd discovered. If each new catalog species moved progressively upward and the 72-hour rewrite continued at the same pace, the changes would reach the surface within weeks. I couldn't let that happen. Morning arrived with the ship's familiar mechanical hum. I dragged myself to the mess hall, avoiding eye contact with my colleagues. Their hushed whispers followed me as I grabbed a coffee and retreated to the ROV control room. I needed a new approach. Studying the creatures themselves wasn't enough. I needed to understand how they were impossibly woven into history. I pulled up the dive schedule. The team had planned to explore a mid-water column area at around 1,500 meters today. Perfect. Not too deep, not too shallow. If my theory was correct, this would push the phenomenon closer to the surface. When the others arrived for the dive briefing, I spoke with uncharacteristic command. Today I'll be handling the ROV cameras. I'm testing a new imaging protocol. My voice stayed steady, hiding the desperation inside. Dr. Carlin, our lead oceanographer, raised an eyebrow. "What's going on, Alistair?" "Potential patterns with bioluminescent radiation," I lied smoothly. "Just a hunch." The lie worked. 3 hours later, the ROV hovered at 1,500 meters, its floodlights carving paths through the midnight blue water. The team focused on water chemistry while I quietly pushed the cameras to their highest sensitivity. I wasn't searching for creatures now. I was searching for what watched them. "High-gain filters active," I murmured, mostly to myself. Sensitivity set to maximum. The monitors filled with digital snow, visual noise hiding almost everything. The image processor strained. "What's with my cameras?" The ROV tech leaned over my shoulder. "Testing. Just 10 minutes." He shrugged, adding it to his list of my weird habits. We found it, a simple, bell-shaped jellyfish drifting past. Ordinary, already documented, perfect. "Running a special imaging sequence," I announced. "Hold all positions." No one argued. Years of trust bought space for my quirks. I recorded the jellyfish, but my real interest was the water surrounding it. I captured gigabytes of grainy footage and rushed it to my workstation for analysis. Hours flew by. I filtered the footage through every algorithm our systems had. I waved off concerned colleagues, skipped meals, ignored the captain calling about my concerning conduct. None of it mattered. I was close. At 2:17 in the morning, the lab empty and the ship quiet, the processing software finally cut enough noise. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. The water around the jellyfish wasn't empty. Faint, shimmering, geometric distortions rippled through it with unnatural precision. They pulsed and reformed in complex patterns, converging on the jellyfish right at the moment I'd logged it officially. "Oh God," I whispered, throat tight. This wasn't random. This wasn't natural. These distortions moved with purpose. I wasn't seeing a phenomenon. I was seeing the watcher. The realization punched the air from my lungs. I leaned closer, mesmerized by the impossible geometry flickering across the screen. That's when it struck. Every control room monitor went black at once. The overhead lights flickered out with a dull buzz. The ship's engines cut. For 3 terrifying heartbeats, I sat in total darkness, hearing only the hull groaning and my own panicked breaths. Then the emergency generators rumbled to life, bathing the room in dim red. Monitors began their slow reboot, casting eerie blue light on the metal walls. But one screen, directly facing me, showed something else before returning to normal. For less than a second, it displayed a perfect crystalline structure of impossible complexity, a snowflake designed by something beyond understanding. It wasn't random, it wasn't a glitch, it was acknowledgement, recognition. I had seen it. Now it had seen me. For 3 days, I kept to myself, a prisoner in my own cabin. The door wasn't locked from the outside, but it might as well have been. I was hiding, not from the crew, but from the terrible knowledge that something out there was watching me back. Captain Reeves made the announcement over the public address system the morning after the blackout. Due to catastrophic and irreparable remotely operated vehicle system failure, we've been ordered to return to port immediately. No questions were asked. Everyone was relieved to be heading home after weeks at sea. Everyone except me. My notebook stayed clutched in my palm like a talisman, its pages filled with the only proof I had. The mid-ocean jellyfish, the last specimen we catalogued before it showed itself to me. The 72-hour cycle would finish during our journey back. I counted down the hours, watching the slow crawl of time on my watch face. The gentle rocking of the ship usually soothed me, but now each wave felt like a countdown, pushing us closer to shore and to whatever was coming. When the Odyssey finally docked, I stood at my cabin porthole studying the familiar coastline. People moved about on the pier, loading crates, checking clipboards. Everything looked normal. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe the pressure, the isolation had cracked something in my mind. I allowed myself a shallow breath of relief as I packed my bag, tucking the notebook into my inside jacket pocket, close to my chest. The weight of it was reassuring, like an anchor. Then my phone buzzed. A news alert lit up the screen. Lost to history, the azure-crested gull is rediscovered on coastlines worldwide. Ornithologists baffled by sudden appearance of historical records. My legs nearly buckled. I gripped the edge of my desk, knuckles white, heart slamming against my ribs. It had reached the surface. The phantom taxonomist had broken through. I stumbled out onto the deck, bright sunlight stinging after days stuck in dim electric light. The busy port suddenly seemed like a dream. People going about their routines, blind to reality being rewritten around them. As I stepped onto the gangplank, a cold thought hit me. What if it was speeding up? What if it wasn't just deep-sea creatures anymore? What if it was already cataloging everything? I looked down at my hands, the same hands I'd known for 38 years. But were they? Had my fingers always bent this way? Had this scar always cut across my thumb? Vertigo spun through me as the awful truth settled in. I couldn't be sure. My memories said yes, but my notebook didn't say a thing about my body. I had no baseline, no control sample. What if I had already been rewritten? What if tomorrow I'd remember a different version of myself, different scars, different bones? Would anyone notice? Would I? I stumbled forward into the crowd, suddenly a stranger in my own skin.